Hello and welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. Hello, Clyde. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being yourself. And I know some folks who are here or who will watch this are saying, "What's this about flying Africans?" uh, First, let me say this. Um, I'm going to use the word Igbo quite a bit. And Igbo is a nation, a group, a tribe in Northern Africa, in Liberia, in Nigeria primarily. But I say this because you'll find various spellings of Igbo. The one that I prefer is the one that I've seen uh, in Nigeria, that being Igbo, but it's pronounced Igbo. I've also seen it spelled Ibo, EBO, and EBOS, but it's all the same people. Now, in Georgia, St. Simon's Islands, which you can see right here, there's a place called the Igbo Landing. It's a historic site at Dunbar Creek on St. Simon's Island, Glenn County, Georgia. Now, when I say it's a historic site, it's historic for us and to us, meaning black people. Uh, it has yet, as far as I know, to be designated a historic place by any government agency. In other words, white folks. But as you'll see, it has quite a bit of recognition among black people, not only here, but around the world. Um, it's the site of what is called one of the largest mass suicides of enslaved people in history. And essentially, here's what is supposed to have occurred. Uh, the Igbo captives, they were Igbo people who were captured, kidnapped in what is today known as Nigeria, purchased for an average of about $100 a piece by slave merchants John Cooper and Thomas Spalding. And they had a slave ship called the Wandering, and they arrived in Savannah, Georgia in 1803. The ship was called the Wanderer. The kidnapped Africans in their chains were then reloaded and packed under the deck of a coastal vessel called the York. And the York was supposed to take them to St. Simon's Island, where they were to be resold. Now, during that segment of the voyage, approximately 75 Igbo rose up in rebellion. They drowned their captors and caused the ship to be grounded in Dunbar Creek. That's where we see right here. That's Dunbar Creek. Okay? Now, at that point, uh, well, a lot of the planners and the slave merchants, they knew about the Igbo people because apparently the Igbo were very, very resistant to being kidnapped and enslaved. not that others weren't, but the Igbo apparently were particularly uh, rebel rousers, resistant. Now, uh, when they forced the boat to be grounded at Dunbar Creek, they came out the boat, marched off the boat, singing, and then at their chief's direction, the chief's direction, they walked into the waters of Dunbar Creek, committing mass suicide. Now, Roswell King, who was a white overseer at a nearby plantation called the Pierce Butler Plantation, is supposedly the first person to have recorded the incident. He and another man, identified only as Captain Patterson, recovered 13 bodies. The others remained missing, and some are believed to have survived the suicide episode. Now, for centuries, some historians have cast doubt on the story, and they have said, oh, we don't believe that really happened. But apparently, after 1980 research, uh, it was verified that this incident really did occur. And uh, what's really deep is that the story had already become a myth um, among black people. There were myths of the water walking Africans. There's a story that says, have you heard about Ebo's Landing? That's the place where they bring the Ebos over in a slave ship, and when they get here, they ain't like it. And so they all start singing, and they march right down in the river to march back to Africa, but they ain't able to get there. They just drown. Now that was Floyd White, an elderly black man who was interviewed. Now he was born in 1844, but he was interviewed in 1930 about the Ebo landing. uh, Now also Wallace Quarterman, uh, he was also interviewed in about 1930, I guess for the same project, the Federal Writers Project. And he said, ain't you heard about them? Well, at that time, Mr. Blue, he was the overseer, and Mr. Blue, he go down one morning with a long whip for to whip him good. Anyway, he whipped him good, and they got together and stuck that hoe in the field, and then rose up in the sky and turned themselves into buzzards and flew right back to Africa. Everybody knows about them. Now, this idea that they flew away is deep part of it, because we have songs and stuff that talk about flying home. And so this is actually like it's not a fairy tale, because we didn't do fairy tales, but it's a story. And it's the idea that we wanted to go home. See, one of the things that the white folks have done is they try to say we didn't try to, number one, we didn't resist hardly, and we didn't want to go back and all that. Look, black folks was trying to get out of here every way we could. This series of artwork that I'm showing right now, actually it's a Jamaican brother named Donovan Nelson. He paid tribute to the event with a series of artworks that are at the Valentine Museum of Art in Richmond, Virginia. So you may have seen them, and you might even see them around. That's from, and it's talking about Igbo landing. But it's been more than that in terms of the stories and things going on with the Igbo landing. Some of which we know where they come from, some we don't. There's a great movie called Daughters of the Dust. And in Daughters of the Dust, uh, oh, wait a minute, I need to go back here. I'm sorry, here we go. All right, Daughters of the Dust. Um, it's a movie about, to some extent, it's about the Geechees. But here's the deep part. Remember, I said that some of the bodies were recovered, and then the majority of them weren't recovered. And so there's a belief that some of them survived. Well, there's also a belief that some of those who did survive became part of this community that to this day still has very much the flavors of the African communities they came from. And there's places called where people call Geechees, uh, who reflect that as well. Now, in Daughters of the Dust, there's some things in it that allude to the Igbo landings. And if you ever see the movie, it's a great movie, great movie. Sister did that movie. But now here's where it gets really deep. There's a contemporary artist by the name of Beyonce. And Beyonce, she did an album called Lemonade, a video album called Lemonade. And in the in the album, there's some songs where, strangely enough, she alludes to both Daughters of the Dust, and then she also alludes to the Flying Africans. I'll let you just look at a little bit of it. Or the Igbo landings. Now, a lot of the younger people, and some of the older people too, who saw the video, they didn't know what this is relationship to when she does these, has these scenes like this. Yeah, this is from, uh, it's a homage to Igbo landings. Did Igbos suicides? Ain't that deep? Yeah. You know, she's been attacked because she did the thing at the Super Bowl, which they said, oh, she was glorifying the Black Panther Party, which she may have been. But I noticed that none of the white folks who love to critique stuff, none of them have mentioned this about this album, what she did there in the video. It may be because they don't know, but some of them do know about the Igbo landing story. They just don't like to talk about it because they don't want us to know. Because it's a deep story. It's like, yeah, those African people were so resistant to even the idea of being enslaved that number one, they rose up on the ship and killed their captors. And then when they saw that they were in this strange land, they said, no, 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 no. We will walk back to Africa if we have to walk on this water. Or if we have to die right here, we are not going to stay here and be enslaved. And see, that's a strong thing. In fact, sometimes it's been called the first uh, freedom march in this country. So they now also Alex Haley talked about it a little bit in Roots in the book. As far as I know, there's nothing about it in the movie, but he did mention something about it in Roots. Um, now, uh, there is a, I guess we can call it a doorway in Nigeria. It's called the Igbo Landing Doorway, and it's there symbolically for the Africans to return. Now, in 2002, there was a consecration of Igbo's Landing. The St. Simon's African American Heritage Coalition invited, I'm going to try to say his name correctly, Chukwemeka Onyeso, Chukwemeka Onyeso. They invited him from Nigeria to come and designate Igbo's Landing as holy ground and put the souls of the Africans to rest. And he said, I came here to evoke their spirits, to take them back to Igbo land. And not only were there participants from the United States, there were people there from Haiti, Belize, Canada, New York, Mississippi, and other places who came to be a part of the consecration. Consecration. This was put there as as a part of that consecration. Is there at Igbo Landing. Ain't that deep? Now, as I said, as far as I know, the state of Georgia and nowhere officially with the government agencies, nobody like that has recognized it. But among African people, among black people all over the country and different places in the world, they recognize Igbo Landing. Uh, One of the places where it's really deep what happened with it was with let me see. Oh, yeah. Now it's also taught as part of the curriculum for coastal Georgia schools. Now, black folks did that because it's not in the white schools; it's in the black schools. Okay, and but Toni Morrison did something really neat. She had one of her books. You know, she's won Nobel Prizes, right? Well, Toni Morrison used the story of the flying Africans as the basis for her novel called Song of Solomon. That was in 1977. And it's the story of a young black man named Milkman Dead. That's right, Milkman Dead. Uh, he's sort of, he's sort of discouraged because of the racism and lack of opportunities having grown up in the North. So he decides to return to the South in search of his ancestral roots. In the course of his travels, he learns from oral histories that his family is descended from an African shaman who possessed the power of flight. And so once he regained the knowledge of his family and his African heritage, Milkman Dead recovers his lost ancestral powers at the end of the novel, and at the moment of his death, flies away. Now, if you never read uh, Song of Solomon, that to me is a good reason why you should. And if you read it before but didn't know the connection, why she wrote that story that way, why she wrote the story at all about Milkman Dead, then you might even read it again with a new appreciation. Toni Morrison is bad. She is so bad. And I just love that name, Milkman Dead. uh, so she did that. She did that. And you'll find other references here and there to the flying Africans. And I wanted this to be one of those stories that we learn enough about that we can pass it on to our children, because they need stories other than, quote, fairy tales. Because, you know, in case you never heard my thing about fairy tales, understand what fairy tales are. They're stories that deal with the idea that people can have their lives changed by fairies. What's a fairy? It's some kind of magical creature, right? If you go and you look at all of the European fairy tales, you will never find any reference to God or the Creator. It's always that these fairies, these magical creatures, they are responsible for, you know, miracles. They don't call them miracles, they just call them by their powers, this whole thing. This is where the seeds of superheroes, European style superheroes, is planted. Because if you notice, superheroes don't believe in God neither, right? So it's an interesting thing that these stories, these fairy tales are written to be told to children without a God or creator being involved. And yet, we also take children and make them go to church. Now, here's what I'll say about that, and you can check it out for yourself. What this will do to children, especially black children who are taken to church as children, at the same time they're learning fairy tales and nursery rhymes and stuff, it's going to create cognitive dissonance because you're giving them two different uh, ideas about how life works. Cognitive dissonance is when you have a belief that is challenged by other information and it contradicts what you believe. And what happens is when a person has cognitive dissonance, it can very much freeze them. They become confused and they're stuck because in order to move forward, you have to accept one or the other. If you give up your belief, then you have to accept the new one. If the new one signals that you might have to make some other changes in how you live, how you do things, that becomes an issue as well. So sometimes people stay with the old belief, even when they have information that says your old belief is not true. They stick with their old belief because it does not require them to change. It simply requires them to reject what might be a reality. If that sounds like Trump supporters, um, very much so, because they're stuck in a belief that this dude is one thing, yet information, factual information, keeps coming out about him, but they stay with their old beliefs. Okay? It's causing cognitive dissonance, and it's going to make their heads explode. But in any case, it's important that we understand how this works and why this story about the flying Africans is so important, because it represents a direct connection to Africa, to African people. Okay? Uh, it says that the Igbo people uh, were serious. Some of these particular Igbo people were serious about trying to get back home, and it has survived through centuries. And so it also survives in us. That's why they spend so much time trying to get us to believe that Africans don't like us, don't want us, and hate us, and all of us got sold by all of them. You know, all of that, all those lies and falsehoods is designed to keep us from connecting. Because think about it, and I'll close with this. When we reconnect as a whole people to the whole of Africa, all of the countries, we accept the idea that we are all connected to some of those countries and some of those cultures, and we may not know directly which ones, but we are connected to the continent, as opposed to now where many of us don't feel a connection. Now, the movie Black Panther helped some, okay, and so that's a good step forward, but we need more. We need more, okay? So I close with that, and I say, let us go forward in flying back to Africa. uh, oh, okay. I see what's happening today. uh, no justice, no peace, no love. KNOW. Clyde, thank you so much. And yes, I know it's been a little bit abbreviated today, but I wanted to do this story and make it be where it's one that you can share with children, and because it's only like 30 minutes long, and I close with that. No justice, no peace, no love. KNOW.